So listen, we only have about 15 minutes. I have a sense that we could probably spend the next 2 hours discussing this film. You probably have a lot of questions. I just wanted to start, really want to ask Bob a question. I mean, it's a very powerful film, although us humans, present company accepted, maybe don't come out of it that well. I mean, having had a chance now, be part of the film, have a chance to see it now, what's your reaction to, seeing the whole thing put together? And how did you feel when you were first approached to be in the movie? Were you going to sign up straight away, or did you have were you nervous?
I was really nervous. It took me a long time to get to the point where I wanted to turn over my home movies to anyone or even show them. So I was a bit nervous, but once these guys came along, I was happy to hand it over to them. I knew they'd do a good job, and well, you saw it. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Yeah. I'm like thrilled to be part of this, and I'm so glad that Nim is Nim and not some imaginary figure now. He's actually real for you, and that I couldn't ask for more. Thanks, Simon and James. And all the people have been extraordinarily gracious to me, and especially to Nim and all the chimps, and I couldn't be happier.
If you want to ask a question, you put your hand up. We have a rope. We have just one roving mic, so I'd ask you to wait until the mic arrives. So if you want to put your... do we have a question? We have a question. Okay, we have one right at the back, and then we have a question just down here. Let's start from the back.
Hi, I'm Hayley Smith, actually, with Wildlife Documentaries. I was really struck by the extraordinary ego that seemed to be driving your film. What was it that attracted you to the story? Was it this unravelling sense of ego that you were getting from your human characters, or what first pulled you to the story of Nim?
Well, it was kind of a weird entry point, I suppose. I mean, it was just after Man on Wire, and I was feeling a little daunted by sort of what we could possibly do to match that story, an amazing story that I stumbled upon. And I came down for breakfast one morning with actually my wife, sort of 8 months pregnant, reading this feature article about this story in a British colour supplement, and kind of bawling her eyes out. I'm sure partly because she was very pregnant, but also I figured just because it was a story that just tapped into something kind of primally sort of maternal in her, and so that was kind of the beginning. I just felt that it was a story of kind of great poignancy. It was just sort of as simple as that. The more you kind of think about it, the more layers it feels it has. So it wasn't about kind of, yes, I mean, human hubris is so much part of the story, but it is also a story about how extraordinary chimpanzees are. It's a story, and it's a story about parenting and all the issues that I sort of subsequently started to deal with. So
Hi, yes, Martin. Like Man on Wire, you're the archive. How long did it take you to get it, and who provided it, apart from the gentleman there?
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, we had a very good archive researcher in New York who scoured all the kind of commercial sources and dug up some amazing stuff. I mean, I guess the moment where Nim meets Mac in his face with his own kind for the first time was a great find. The stuff from Lemsip was also a great find. But Bob provided a lot of that material that you see, and some of the really wonderful sort of stuff in the film came from a lot of our contributors. Maybe you'd like to talk about that.
Well, I just had all this stuff, and I didn't really necessarily want to hand it over, but James and I and Simon together agreed that they knew how to make a film, so they know how to make a film, and I felt fairly comfortable handing it to them. I'd been approached before, but had turned down everyone else, so I was just fortunate that I had video equipment back in the 70s and was able to get all that footage. I mean, there's a lot of it, so. And Nim was amazing. He loved the camera. I mean, as you can tell, he really liked to be a movie star. I can't think of a better movie star than Nim.
Any more questions? Any more questions? Okay, we have one down here, and then one in the sort of fourth back row.
It was a really beautiful film. I just wondered, do you think it was very much like a product of its time, the whole 70s thing, where people didn't really think about the repercussions of where this was going? It seemed like people's decisions in the main were very much in the moment and kind of self-gratifying.
Just before you ask that, I mean, I selfishly, I think that's a really interesting question. Also, I mean, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, it's curious because this is sort of occupies the same kind of historical period as Man on Wire, and now were you conscious of that when you set the film, that this is very much, I mean, somebody says in the film, hey, it was the 70s, so are we planning is there a third film in the 70s trilogy?
Yeah, I have no idea. It's not part of a trilogy, but maybe, who knows. And yeah, I mean, I guess there was a sort of consciousness that it was a sort of one of those kind of historical curios that you kind of feel was sort of very much rooted in its time, but and sort of couldn't happen now, and that's kind of what made it so interesting. But I guess, you know, it is a story that actually spans 3 decades, actually 4 if you consider that it died in 2000. But it does nevertheless sort of feel very 70s, doesn't it? As a sort of idea. And I think, you know, yeah, clearly people didn't understand chimpanzees back then, nor, I guess, sort of ethics of custodial students and things like that, you know, in the way that we do now. Maybe you could sort of talk about that because you lived through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when I came along, it was pretty obvious there were several generations, let's say, of students that came through there. I was amongst the last, and so there was a change about the time I came along in terms of what's really going on here. I mean, as opposed to handing out babies, now we're getting them back, and we're seeing what's happened to them and how difficult it is for them to become chimps. So, you know, it's an evolutionary process, and we're better for it now. I mean, it was horrible. I don't know, handing out chimp babies, taking them away from their mothers and giving them to humans and then giving them to another human. And yeah, it didn't seem like they were really thinking it through. But we weren't thinking a whole lot of stuff through back then either, you know, in terms of this. So I think that things have changed quite a lot in the chimp world especially. I mean, one of my colleagues is here right now, Sally Boyson, who did research at the IPS before I got there and knew all those chimps before I got there, and I think she'd agree that things were evolving and changing. It just took a little longer than we expected. So.
My dad worked on the Monkey and the Rocket in 1969 in Cocoa Beach, so
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a conversation we can have in the bar.
Yeah.
That was maybe one of the start of it in a way, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
As Bob said, I'm, oh,
Can we get a mic?
may I?
Yeah.
I
This is
appreciate
Professor Dr. Sally Boyson from Ohio State University. She's here on. She's at
You know,
Portsmouth.
I only wish I had given Simon a photograph of Sheba, who is Nim's daughter, who I got when she was 2, because she was being used as a PR chimp at a local zoo. And when I saw that happening, knowing where she came from, I don't know if you know this, Bob, but I was determined to get her away from that situation. And I knew it was just a matter of time. But what I wanted to point out is, much of what you saw, and boy, ego is what we were talking about, was idiosyncratic to that project, to her terrorists, whatever. I had my project for 24 years. No, people don't throw their chips away necessarily when they're 5 years old. The entertainment business, often that happens. But I was working with adult male chimps out of the cage when they were 11 years old. So, and I've never, in 37 years of working with chimpanzees directly, have been bitten by a chimp. But I knew chimpanzee behavior as well. These people knew nothing. So to take a chimp into a human household and not do what we minimally do with our own children, produce, you know, we socialize them, you don't fight, and none of that happened. So when I heard that a 3-year-old chimp was being returned, I mean, I was just appalled. So much of what you heard coming out that sounds perhaps, scientifically credible, not at all. Not at all. Come on, he was sleeping with a 17-year-old. Yeah. So consider the source, But at any rate, Sheba is alive and well and living in a sanctuary right now in Louisiana. She's 29 years old. I can't believe that, Bob, we're old.
Okay, we had a question. Sorry, we had a question just there. Yeah,
Just
thank
very
you.
quickly, kind of leading on, the access you had to the contributors was amazing, given that a lot of them couldn't have been too proud of their actions. How on earth did you get some of that access to be so honest and raw?
Well, actually, we started by getting the rights to a book by a woman called Elizabeth Hess, who had done a lot of the legwork for us, in fairness, and written a very good book. She, in a way, was sort of the gateway to the sort of the NIM community, with a couple of notable exceptions like Herb Terrace and Laura Petito. But Bob kind of came through Elizabeth, really, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Elizabeth approached me and said that Simon would be calling me, and after that we chatted, and after we pretty much came to an agreement, I did everything I could to help him. Including getting squeeze cages and stuff like that. You see some of the stuff in the film, that chimp equipment, let's say, that you wouldn't necessarily be able to just find as a filmmaker. So I did everything I could to help him, and I'm way glad I did.
But it should also be pointed out that James Marsh is very persuasive.
Yeah.
The journey across America.
He actually...
spent a lot of time with a lot of people, and James is a brilliant, at winning people's confidence and trust, and I think
James came to my house in San Francisco. I talked to him on Wednesday. He was in Copenhagen. He was at my house on Friday. So after that, and then we talked about Bob Dylan for an hour, and then I knew it was the right guy.
Okay, we have time for maybe a couple more questions if there are. Okay, we have one here and one at the back, so we can do it anyway.
Hi, well done, great film, really enjoyed it. Has there been any kind of negative reaction from the people in the film? Because everyone comes out looking that shiny. And obviously when you're making a film, you kind of, as you said, you win people's trust and you kind of get them to tell you their story, and then in some instances they don't look great in the end. And has there been any sort of bad reaction back towards you guys from anyone?
Well, I guess this is the thing that we worry about the most. I mean, most of the contributors in the film saw the film for the first time at Sundance, and I was very, very nervous throughout that screening about some people, and I was very, very gratified, relieved when a sort of hand came and sort of squeezed my arm. It was Laura Petito, who I don't know, for some reason I didn't think would like the film, but she did. I mean, the one person, I guess the person you'll probably dancing around is Herb Terrace. Terrace saw the film in New York at around Sundance time. We screened the film for him privately. He sent us a very gracious note. He's not happy with every aspect of the film. The things that he's concerned about, we haven't gone to great length about, but are not the things that you would imagine. I think he was kind of expecting it to be a kind of PBS, sort of Nova science doc, and it was never going to be that. And indeed, we never told him it was. We were all, I think, always very straight with him and very honest about what the film was. And he gave us of his time very generously, of his archives, and we worked with him, and I don't think we ever pulled the wool over his eyes. So, in a sense, he comes out of the story as he does, because that's what he said on camera. So.
Okay, we have. Do we have one more question? Just at the back? I think there was one more question.
Okay, congratulations about the film. I would like to ask Bob, during the last years of NIM's life, did you ever have any physical contact with him? Because we don't see you touch, I mean, you do touch him, but he is behind the bars at the end.
No, actually that was one of the reasons why I wanted to get in other chimps. Humans and chimpanzees just shouldn't be together in social groups like that. And I didn't want to create that mess all over again. He really needed to be with other chimps. You saw those holes in the cage. I put my arms all the way through there and would give him hugs and stuff, and he'd do the same thing through the bars. But the reality is that a 220-pound chimpanzee might not bite me, but he probably would have bit my wife or somebody else out on a walk, and that wouldn't have been good. I did go to Black Beauty Ranch right after he was moved down there, and it's not really explained in the film, but you know, there's millions of things that you could have put in there that aren't. But I went down there and went in the cage with Nim before Stephanie went down and got mopped around. But Nim and I hung out for 6 hours, and I didn't want to come out of the cage. And that's at the point at which they realized that, wow, this guy's going to be trouble, because he really does know Nim, and he really does want to, you know, well, I wanted him to spend more money, get all the chimps from OU and all that. So I think that there is a lot of politics. And the reason why they didn't want me around is because I wanted him to do the right thing as opposed to what they were doing. So it took a long time for me to finally get back there. Thank God for Chris Byrne, who, you know, I just gave him a cold call and said, hey, I want to come. He let me. And then we just worked behind the scenes, and we never even told Cleveland. And I went down there for like a year before Cleveland even knew it. So, you know, and Chris would leave me in charge of the ranch. Dude, I don't know. Elephants? I mean, he gave me a half-an-hour course in how to feed the elephants, and then he left and went to LA. So that's the kind of relationship we had. It was pretty amazing. Anyway.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're going to have to. We're going to have to wrap it up there. Simon, just quickly, I'll give you a quick chance to go a quick plug. So, I mean, there is going to be an opportunity to see this movie, so they can tell their friends, can't they?
It opens here courtesy of Icon, who also distributed Man on Wire, on August 12th. And it opens actually in America on July the 8th. Roadside Attractions are releasing it there. I also just wanted to say a big thanks to my partners on this film, Passion Pictures. George Chignall, who's over there, who was co-producer, did a brilliant job. John Baxter. Great to have such sort of partners who put their heart and soul into everything they do. Thank you.
Well, can I just, don't go. I'd just like to say a big thing. I think it's an amazingly poignant film. I said to Simon before we came in, a remarkable, great film for me is that it stays with you, and you kind of, you know, you keep turning over in your head. I'd just like to say a big thank you to Simon, and a big thank you to Bob. Just put your hands together for